everyone, and welcome to our 5th podcast. This is From Blighty to the Badlands. Today we're going to look at Western movies that feature some of our most interesting British actors. We've got superstars, we've got character actors, we've got some cult actors even. So I'm joined today by Kevin Lyons, who is the editor of the Encyclopedia of Fantastic Film and Television. That's EOFFTV.com. You can see that at the bottom of the screen. He'll be helping me with some interesting facts and maybe some anecdotes even about some of the actors that we come across in this episode of the podcast. So we'll go straight along to our first film. And this one's a 50s gem, I think. Not a great classic 50s movie, but one of those really interesting kind of B movies that were around in the 1950s. It's called A Man Alone, and it is directed by and also stars Ray Milland, and it was made in 1955.
Vom Sandsturm gepeitscht taumelt ein Fremder in die nächtliche Stadt. Ein Mann allein, gehetzt und gejagt. Sie sehen Ray Milland zum ersten Mal als Regisseur und Hauptdarsteller in Ein Mann allein. Mary Murphy, ein Mädchen, dessen Vertrauen stärker ist als Verleumdung. Ward Bond, ein aufrechter Mann, den die Liebe zu Frau und Kind schuldig werden ließ. Raymond Burr, ein Mörder, der den Pöbel auf seine Seite zu bringen weiß.
Wenn ihr ihn gefunden habt, sagt mir Bescheid. Und die Gerechtigkeit wird ihren Lauf nehmen. So wahr ich hier stehe. Suchen Sie etwas? Ja, Sie. Was haben Sie eigentlich gegen mich?
Stanley, Sie sind der eigentliche Mörder dieses Mädchens. Sie sind der gemeinste Mensch, der mir je begegnet ist.
Ich wehre mich nicht. Sie können doch keinen Wehrlosen erschießen.
Nein, aber ich kann ihn mit den Fäusten erledigen.
So, A Man Alone, it's an interesting film. It starts with opening scenes on dust-blown sand dunes in the St. George area of Utah. It's shot in true color, which I feel adds a lot of depth and an almost hallucinatory quality for the opening scenes. There's no dialogue, you can feel the heat, see the sand, there's snakes, there's cacti, and our hero Wes Steele, is basically stranded alone in this desert scape, and he comes across a stagecoach robbery where everyone is dead. He soon stumbles upon a town in the middle of the night. There's some extremely good nocturnal footage here, where he ends up having to gun down someone who is going to shoot him. Wes Steele then ends up being looked after, hiding away in a house, being looked after by a comely young lady who happens to be the daughter of the town sheriff, who is laid up upstairs, bedridden. At the same time, Raymond Burr, another great 50s character actor, is a character called Stanley, who is the local bigwig, who is trying to frame Wes Steele for the murder of the people on the stagecoach. So it's a very taut little Western thriller with some good noir elements, despite the fact it's shot in true color. What did you make of A Man Alone?
At first 10 minutes or so, I thought, oh, I'm not going to like this one. It struck me as being one of those films that caused me not to like Westerns in the first place. It felt a little bit too generic when it started.
Yes.
But after 10, 15 minutes or so, it was really gripping. It was really, really good. And what an iconic title. How many times have we mentioned A Man Alone in terms of the plot in these podcasts? You know, I mean, this is the great Western title, isn't it? A Man Alone. And it's really gripping. It really, once you get past that first 10 minutes and your expectations change, and it's not going to be a generic B Western, it's going to be something a bit better than that, then yeah, great stuff. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Really
I
liked
mean,
it.
for me, it's cut from the same cloth as films like High Noon and
Yeah.
7 Hours to Kill, that sort of McCarthy era paranoid
Yes.
Western film, which basically shows the inhabitants of a town being quite a dirty bunch.
Yeah.
And the film picks up lots of film noir elements. There's lots of low key lighting. That first scene
Mhm.
where he enters the town
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
fantastic. It's also got Lee Van Cleef as one of the heavies. So Lee Van Cleef watchers will like this one of his early roles. Of course, he was in High Noon as well.
Mhm.
But of course, it stars a very interesting actor, Ray Milland. Now, Ray Milland, he was born Alfred Reginald Jones in Neath, Glamorgan. So he's a Welshman, Ray Milland, on the 3rd of January, 1907, and he passed away on the 10th of March, 1986. And Milland was in a lot of thrillers,
Yeah.
a lot of film noir, and he was good at playing these ambiguous characters, wasn't he?
He was very much, yeah. I mean, people will probably remember him best for he won an Oscar for The Lost Weekend in 1948, when he plays the alcoholic who's locked away in this room, struggling with his demons. Those kind of roles really suited him so well. He was really, really good at that. Really powerful actor, and he's one of those guys who, for many years I just assumed he was American. Because there seems to be no reason to believe he wasn't, and he's not one of those actors who went to America when he was a child. He was into his 20s before he decided to go to the States. He was in the army. In fact, he was in the Household Cavalry.
He was in the British Army, yes.
Yeah, but he became a real sort of crack shot. He was he was winning all sorts of awards in shooting competitions. So, yeah, let's put him in a Western. That makes sense, doesn't it? This guy can handle a gun. He knows what he's doing. But he left the army in 1928 when he was 21 and decided, acting was going to be his thing. Hung around in Britain for a while. He made his first appearance on screen in a film called Piccadilly, which was released in 1929. He was an extra in that.
Okay.
And didn't move to the States till the following year when he was put under contract at MGM. And after that, well, there was no stopping him. He was everywhere in the 50s and 60s.
Yes.
And,
the film, excuse me, the film I really remember him in is a film noir called Alias Nick Beale.
That's right, yeah.
Where he does actually play old Nick himself.
That's right, he does, yes.
That's a nice, creepy, fog-ridden film noir, so that's a good one to pick up, yeah.
I mean, later on, things didn't go as planned later on. There were things like, the thing with two heads and frogs. But, he went from The Lost Weekend to frogs. So, I mean, it's quite a career trajectory. But he was one of those actors who's always classier than anything he appeared in when it came to that kind of level of film. No matter how bad the film was, he brought a level of class to it. He's a wonderful, wonderful actor. Really good.
Yes, yeah. But I think, Man Alone is definitely a film that's worth seeking out for any Western fan, but people who really like those 50s compact B Westerns.
And if like me, you hadn't seen Milland do anything like a Western before, it's a really interesting film on that level, just to see him trying out something you've not seen him do before.
Yeah.
And he's so good in it, really is.
Now, the next one that we're going to look at is it's a spaghetti Western. So it's an mainly Italian production. And it stars a couple of, I'd probably say a couple of our most famous cult actors. One is John Richardson, and the other actor or actress is Martine Beswick. The film is called John Il Bastardo, so John the Bastard, and it was directed by Armando Crispino in 1967.
Vado a ritirare il denaro alla banca e ritorno subito.
Non temere, non partirò senza di te.
Dammi quell'altra adesso.
John the Bastard, it's quite an unusual spaghetti western.
Yeah, it's Don Juan in the West, isn't it?
It's
It's
Don
Alfie
Juan.
in the Old West.
It is, and it's quite a unique spaghetti western, quite singular. And it starts with this unusual pre-credit scene, which sort of positions the film as a flashback from his servant, from John's servant, who was called Moronello. And the opening title sequence is basically point of view shots from John of him sort of chasing nubile Euro starlets around.
That's right. Yeah.
That's it. It's the oddest thing. So we don't get to see John Richardson, who is John in the film. We just get these sort of young ladies just swooning over him in the opening sequence. Now, as played by Richardson and in the script, he is a literal and figurative bastard. He really is an unpleasant piece of work who uses people, particularly women, to gain, usually to rob them. Until he finds out that he is heir to the fortune of the father of Don Francisco Tesorio, who is played by Claudio Camasso, and who is also married to Donna Antonia, who is played by Martine Beswick. And the core drama of the film is John finding out that he is Tesorio's half-brother. That keeps the film flowing. And also there's one great sequence where he confronts his mother, who's kept this secret from him all his life. So what did you make of this wild and bizarre spaghetti western?
Bizarre is the word for it. It's a very odd film. I liked the moral uncertainty of it, that even at the end I wasn't quite sure if we were ever meant to like John at all. You know, you kind of all the way through you think, oh, I hate this guy. Then there's kind of a moment or two you think, oh, actually maybe he's been misunderstood. I don't know. Oh no, I hate him again. And I quite like that. I kind of like the fact that there was no certainty about who he was and how we should feel about him. And that was really nicely conveyed. Yes.
Now, the two British actors in the film, John Richardson, who was born on the 19th of January 1934, only down the road from me, actually, in Worthing, in West Sussex.
Right, yes.
Now, sadly, John Richardson did die in January, on the 5th of January, I believe, from COVID complications.
COVID-19, yes, that's right. Yes.
And the other British actress is Martine Beswick. Now, she was born on the 26th of September 1941 in Port Antonio, Jamaica, to a British father and Portuguese Jamaican mother. And Richardson and Beswick actually married, didn't they, in '67?
They did. They'd worked together the year before, in fact, on the Hammer film 1 Million Years BC. The dinosaur one. Most people don't remember them in it because they just remember Raquel Welch in the fur bikini, because that's all anybody remembers about 1 Million Years BC. But yes, they were both in it. He was the hero of the piece, and she was his spurned lover, who he's sort of overlooked when he meets Raquel. And that's where they first met. So yeah, they met on that. They worked on this film together, and they were married the following year. And Richardson had also made another Western, didn't he, in Italy? He made Execution in 1968 for Domenico Paolella.
He did, and that, I believe, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that was one of the 2 or 3 spaghetti westerns that were actually filmed in Israel.
Right, yes, I think you're right. That's right, yes. Yeah, which gives it quite a distinctive look, doesn't it?
That's
quite
yeah,
interesting.
does,
yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And he was one of those actors who never really sort of became a star, but he was always hovering around the edges of stardom. In fact, he was supposed to have been one of the actors considered to be James Bond on Her Majesty's Secret Service. I can see that, he had the look. But to be honest, in the years since On Her Majesty's Secret Service, every actor who was of his age and reasonably decently looking, is said to have been considered for James Bond to replace Sean Connery. So I don't know how much store we put in that, but every actor of his generation claimed that they were up for James Bond. But certainly he said he was one of those that was in the frame. But yeah, I mean, he did a lot of Italian films, didn't he? In the end, he came back.
Worked with Bava, didn't he? He
yeah.
worked with. He was in a lot of Gialli. He
did things like Torso and
yes.
things like that. Yeah, so he did a huge amount of stuff in Italy. And
I do find that John Richardson's acting was often quite stiff, but yes. I think he's a little less so in this film.
This is one of his better performances. I've always found him a little bit unapproachable as an actor. I can't quite engage with him like I do with other actors. And I think, like you say, that's because he's very stiff a lot of the time. But yeah, he's very good in this. There was something about this role that clearly appealed to him and really sort of, clicked with him, and he just seemed to go with it. So, and of course, he gets to act alongside Martine as well, who, at that time they were already in a relationship. And Martine's a legend. She did Bond twice, From Russia with Love, and she had a fairly vicious cat fight with Elisa Gurr in that one.
Yes.
She turned up. I'm actually in From Russia with Love. If you watch the credits at the beginning, as I tend to do, she is unfortunately credited as Martin Beswick, which is she's certainly no Martin, absolutely not. And she turned up again later as Paula Kaplan in Thunderball. So she was a Bond girl twice over. Yeah. And then, of course, she became fairly synonymous with Hammer. She did 1 Million Years BC, the frankly bloody awful Prehistoric Women, which is another one of their sort of, fantasy films set in a sort of lost world type thing. It's absolutely dreadful film, terrible. But she did much better in Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde,
where
she plays Sister Hyde, and she is really, really, really good in that. Fantastic. Yes. And she was working right through into the 1990s. She decided to retire and give it up. But these days, you can find her, well, you could find her pre-COVID just about everywhere. She's very, very popular on the fan circuit, turning up doing signings and doing talks and having chats with people. She's one of a little group. There's Caroline Munro, there's Valerie Leon, Madeline Smith, and Martine, and they all sort of travel together as a kind of, a little band of
what an entourage.
Wonderful ladies from my childhood. I grew up in the 1970s, and they were on television in the late night horror films on a Friday night every week, and she's absolutely charming, I have to say. A really lovely lady.
Yeah, I've met Martine Beswick. She signed this for me.
Oh, look at that.
So that's
marvelous.
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, she does a lot of signings these days, so you can see her just about everywhere. So that's great.
Okay, so moving along to the next film. This is a 1968 film, which was actually directed by a great director, Edward Dimitri. It stars Sean Connery, and the film is called Shalako. Shalako is right. Shalako stars Sean Connery, as I said, who has to lead a group of European aristocrats out of off from Indian land, from an Indian reservation, after they found themselves straying over there to on a big game hunt. So it's an interesting film to a certain extent, because you've got this harsh terrain around these people, which is contrasted with their high class dining, and they even have a butler who's played by Eric Sykes. It's a frustrating film because it could be so much better.
I know. When we got to one of the dining scenes, I just couldn't help thinking of Carry On Up the Khyber, to be honest. It was just, it didn't, there was nothing about it that really made me go, oh, this is good. I'm just a bit flat.
It is. Yeah. And I mean, the action scenes, Connery handles the action scenes very well, as you would expect, because he's a big, tough, burly guy, and that's what he can do. It's got Brigitte Bardot with very heavy mascara, who actually puts in a bit of a poor performance. Now, the best female actress in the film is Honor Blackman, I think. Of
course, yes.
Who's a bit of a racy aristocrat who falls for a bit of rough in the name of Bosky Fulton, who's played by the Northern Irish Stephen Boyd. It's an action adventure, but it doesn't go beyond that. It doesn't have any real substance beyond that.
No, that's right. All the ingredients are there for something special. I don't know, it just comes out a bit of a stodgy old mess, I thought. I didn't quite... just couldn't warm to it. I'd heard a lot of bad things about it beforehand. I tried to put those out of my mind, because we know that, there are a lot of films from that period that have got bad reputations and turn out to be great. But yeah, this one didn't rise above it, to be honest. It was just,
it's a handsome film, but
very pretty film. But the best thing about it, of course, is the cast. You've got, like we were saying, you've got all these great British actors in it. I don't have to tell you who Sean Connery is, surely. I mean, you even did the title in his accents. I mean, that's how famous this man is. Do we really need an introduction to Sean Connery? No, absolutely not. Just to say that he is James Bond. There were other blokes who said they were, but they're all interlopers. There was only Sean Connery, as far as I'm concerned. The others, they don't count. So they don't count at all. They're nice guys, but they don't count. Got Honor Blackman, who of course had worked with Connery on Goldfinger.
Of course.
As the wonderful Pussy Galore. So
Pushy.
Yeah, Pushy Galore. and of course she'd been Kathy Gale in the Avenger on TV. So she was quite sort of an action heroine herself, although not really used as such in this film, I don't think. So Eric Sykes turned up. There's Valerie French as Eleanor. She was born in London as well. So
indeed,
and in a reversal of our little theme, Alexander Knox, who's in it, he was in Britain making film and TV for years and years and years, but was actually Canadian. So that's a little reversal of of our theme, that we've got a guy who a lot of people would probably assume was British, but no, he was born in Canada.
Is it Jack Hawkins who's in it as well?
Jack Hawkins. How could I forget Jack Hawkins? Yeah,
and absolutely. Of course the Northern Irishman Stephen Boyd, who turns up in a few Euro westerns, because Shalako is a Euro western. It's filmed in Spain. And as well as some really interesting action films like is it Kill Kill Kill?
Yes. Yeah. Like I said, the cast is great. Watch the film for the cast. They don't sort of watch it expecting a great story or anything, but just watch it for these fantastic. Just watch it for Eric Sykes turning up in a western. I mean, who would have thought it?
Yeah, and I think that there's one of the other sort of jarring things, probably more so now than ever, is Woody Strode, the great black actor portraying an Indian chief.
I know.
Strode did many better westerns.
Oh, lot of better westerns. Yeah. Always good to see him, but yeah, he did better.
Now, the other thing is with Shalako, it sort of alludes, or it's very similar to Hombre, which directed by Martin Brit,
Right.
which was made similar time, or I think the year before. But in that film, you've got a white man who'd been brought up by Indians, who's got to help a similar bunch of white, upper middle class, upper class people. But the film's got that added socio-political interest. It's got much more depth to it than this. At the end of it, it just feels like Shalako wants to help them because he fancies Bridget Bardot.
Yeah.
And even that doesn't really
add up too much, does it? No.
It doesn't add up to much. No.
No.
It's a good looking Western Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll move on to the next film. This is my favorite film on the list, probably. It stars a British actor who's garnered quite a cult status over the years from his films in Italy, particularly. His name's John Steiner, and in here he plays a character called Dr. Henry Price. And anyone who's a fan of spaghetti westerns, or particularly the political, more left-leaning spaghetti westerns, will know that the film is Tepepa, which was directed by Giulio Petroni in 1969. Tepepa. It's one of the few spaghetti westerns that were actually made in 1969. There was a bit of a glut of western movies coming out of Italy during that year. I think they burnt themselves out for a little. So it's one of the many westerns that takes place during the Mexican Civil War. These films are usually left-leaning films, very fashionable at the time in Italy to be on the left. On the far left, or indeed a communist filmmaker in Italy at the time. And it's cut from that cloth, but I think it's much more complex in its overall message in the film. It's written by Franco Salinas, who wrote Quemada, State of Siege, and Battle of Algiers, all very strong anti-imperialist films, really. And in the context of spaghetti westerns, it's actually a relatively large production. It makes superb use of Spanish locations like the deserts of Almeria, Cabo de Gata National Park, and even towns like Guadix in southern Spain. And the cinematography is wonderful. There's lots
Beautiful,
of
isn't it?
it is beautiful, yes.
Yeah.
There's lots of positioning of extras.
Mm.
Tepepa is basically a revolutionary hero in the film, and you see he's played by Thomas Milian, who was, you know, embodied this type of character in Italian cinema at the time. But in the frame of all the you know, all the sort of gathering scenes where Tepepa is giving speeches, etc., you get all these brilliant sort of positioning of characters like the peons of Mexico. So it's really looks great. It's really powerful. So what did you think of Tepepa?
It's a fascinating film. Of all of this bunch in this we're doing in this episode, this is the pick of the crop for me. This is the one that I was most excited about when I saw it. It's like you say, so unusual. I love the sort of political commitment. I love the sort of the message it was putting across and the sort of passion that was coming across with it. And of all performances I've seen Thomas Milian do, and I haven't seen as many as you've seen, but I'd say this is one of the best I've seen from him. He's absolutely magnificent in this film. And the whole film is sort of shot through with that passion, isn't it? That sense of righteous indignation and outrage, and it's got something important to say, and it's going to say it. And I love that. Really good. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's right. I mean, it probably is the best of Thomas Milian's Zapata westerns.
Yeah.
At the time, because he's a more complex character.
That's right.
You know,
yeah.
the screenwriter hasn't, Solinas hasn't just created this whiter than white political hero. He's done a great wrong as well. Yeah. And he believes that great wrong that he's done to a woman doesn't mean anything in the context of a revolution. And that's right. That's the crux of the story.
Yeah.
That Dr. Henry Price has turned up to basically to kill Tepepa in revenge. But Dr. Henry Price is also a doctor, of course.
Of course.
So he has the weight of the Hippocratic Oath, and almost a growing admiration for the Tepepa, the anti-hero, but still that desire for revenge. It's it's fantastic. And also Steiner is brilliant.
Steiner is fantastic. He's very early in his career as well, wasn't it? This one, it was I think, was this his first Italian film? I know he'd done Marat Sade, he'd been in Bedazzled, and he'd been in Work Is a Four-Letter Word. I think those were his only other major roles. He'd done some TV stuff prior to this, but I think this is possibly his first trip to Italy, or certainly one of his earliest ones.
I think so, and a big role. The third, I mean, he's working with Thomas Milian and also Orson Welles.
That's right. Yes, yeah. Although apparently Wells and Milian didn't get on, did they, during the making of this? Apparently there was a bit of a contretemps or two. But Steiner didn't seem to let that affect him. He was fantastic, and as he said earlier, he stuck around in Italy, didn't he? He was there for a long time, making some great films in all sorts of genres.
Well, we mentioned him last time, didn't we? What a great villain he became in
absolutely
70s Italian movies.
So many Polizieschi. He did the White Fang films with Lucio Fulci, and of course, you know, from my sort of part of the filmic world, he'll always be remembered for that rather grisly demise in Dario Argento's Tenebrae, which is probably where I first saw him, I think, actually. But again, one of those guys that I assumed was either American or Italian. In my early days of doing all this film research stuff, I spent ages trying to find out what John Steiner was a pseudonym for, but it turned out he wasn't. It turned out he was a homegrown star, born in Chester, in Cheshire, in January 1941.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, born in Chester. So that's northwest, isn't it?
That's northwest. Yeah.
Yes, I always thought. I always had him pegged as being from Liverpool from some sources, but it's Chester.
It's Chester, yeah. That seems to be the most accurate source we've got. But yeah, he had a great career, didn't he? He made some fantastic films. He turned up in all sorts of great stuff. And then in the early 90s, he retired. The Italian scene in particular was kind of on its way out. And so he retired, moved to Hollywood, and he became a real estate agent with a company called Engel and Volkers, based in Beverly Hills. I mean, how posh is that? And what I really love about him is that if you go to the website of this company, he has his own page on there, which is full of all the usual testimonials from people he's sold all these swanky homes to and everything. It's a lovely picture of him, all that sort of stuff. And in his bio, he's only got a couple of lines in his bio, but he does actually go out of his way to say that he was an actor with a Broadway success to his name and a cult following for B horror movies. Very well done, John. Absolutely, what a star. You haven't turned your back on us, even though you're out there selling, you know, multi-million-dollar homes. Got to love him. What a wonderful man.
Good for him. But anyway, back to the film. Tepepa is a must-see Western.
Of all the ones on this list now, that's the one. If you're only going to watch one, you know, this week, go watch Tepepa. That's Kev's tip of the week. There you go about that.
Right. So the next three movies that we're going to look at are some of the meatiest and controversial films that were ever made. At least two of them are. So we're going to turn our attention now to a film that stars, or rather features, one of our great character actors, cult actors. He was also a leading man in quite often, and he's Donald Pleasance. The film we're going to look at is Ralph Nelson's 1970 controversial Western, Soldier Blue.
Get out of here!
Get up here, you son of a bitch! Come on! Well, don't just stand there! Get your ass up here!
I couldn't forgive myself if something happened to you.
Well, thank you.
Did I see you?
I spit.
Well, how could you?
You stupid, beardless tenderfoot! I hope you choke on berries! Do you hear me? I hope you throw up all night! Oh, Holden. No, right!
You want to hear it? Get out of the way!
No!
What are you doing?
I'm taking off my pants.
Why?
Because it's hotter than hell and they're itching. There we are. Good luck, Soldier Blue. I'll tell him at the fort it wasn't my fault.
It begins with text on the screen that tells us that mankind has written his history in blood, and it goes on in much the same way. It starts famously with Buffy St. Marie's tremolo voice singing that very
Great
famous
song.
and atmospheric theme song. The film's based on a novel called Arrow in the Sun by Theodore Olson. It tells the story of a cavalryman called Honus Grant, who at the beginning, he appears to be the only decent soldier in his company, and that distinction is quite heavy-handed. actually.
Yes, it is, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not subtle film at all. No.
No, it's not a subtle film.
No.
So they're transporting a woman called Cresta, but are ambushed by Cheyenne at the beginning of the film. The first sign of the violence in the film is basically the side of someone's face exploding as a bullet impacts. You know from that point that it's going to be a brutal film.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a massacre. The company are massacred, and then Honus and Cresta are the only survivors. And what follows is a history lesson as Cresta and Honus trek across the land to civilization, I guess. And she tells Honus how the indigenous peoples of the Americas had been treated by the American army. There's a lot of interesting things. There's a bit of humor. He's shocked by a lack of feminine decorum. She's clearly wiser to the ways of the wilderness than him. He seems incredibly naive to even be in the army. Very odd, strangely written character. It's a very polemical script. What do you think of Soldier Blue?
Well, it's interesting. When you first sent me this list, I was quite excited to see it again because I hadn't seen it for so long. And I remember really loving it. But I think it kind of holds up today. It has a lot of really good qualities about it. It's not quite as good as I remembered it. It is a little bit sort of hectoring in places. Like I say, it's not a subtle film. It kind of comes at you with a big mallet, which it then beats you over the head with for a couple of hours. But, you know, it is making a really important point. But like a lot of films that are trying to make a really important point, they don't know when to stop. And it just like, yeah, we've got the point now. Like, you know, let's get back to some story now. But it's like, oh no, here comes another lecture. Here comes another bit of, you know, bit of business. And it's like, I don't know, there's something missing from it that I enjoyed the first time around. I think I was a bit younger, a bit more naive in the ways of the world back then.
Yeah, I find it, I mean, I'm not sure if I particularly like Soldier Blue, but I think it's a film that certainly needed to be made.
Oh, it needed to be made. It's a story that was crying out to be told. It definitely needed telling. Yeah, so in that sense, it was a very brave film for its time. And we certainly can't fault it for that. Yeah.
And very fashionable at the time, of course, with the sort of hippie movement and anti-establishment movement.
Yeah.
But we get, again, you're talking about bits of business in the film, strange business that goes on.
Yeah.
Now, when we're introduced to our English star, the often very nasty bald man, Donald Pleasance, his character is called Isaac Q. Cumber.
Yes.
So he sort of turns up with his top hat, false teeth, and being slightly mad, and as a gun trader. Again, another little bit of another lecture about how Indians or the indigenous people bought guns from white traders, which escalated the violence in the United States. Would you like a break?
Sorry, I've been holding. It was obvious I was holding it in. Sorry, do carry on.
That's okay. Yeah. So, yeah, what did you think of Donald Pleasance's performance?
Eccentric would be the right word for it, I think.
Does it a lot?
He does it a lot. I will never say a bad word against Donald Pleasance. He's one of my favourite actors. Absolutely love him. The character felt slightly out of place in this film. I think he did what he could do with it, but you know, you've got this very grim film that had this important, serious message to convey, and then you got a guy called Isaac Cucumber in it who's sort of got bad teeth and all these strange quirks, and he just seemed like he'd wandered in from another film at times. He didn't feel, you know, it's Donald Pleasance, so the performance is great, but I don't think it's great for this film. It's great for another film.
Yes.
Do you see what I mean by that? It's kind of sticks out a bit like a sore thumb, I'm afraid, that one. Yeah.
No, I didn't know that Donald Pleasance was actually born in Worksop in October 1919. That's Nottinghamshire in England.
Yeah.
He actually died in Saint-Paul-de-Vence in France on the 2nd of Feb 1995. But he had an incredible acting career and in some fantastic cult gems.
some of my favorite films of all time. We could spend the whole podcast just reeling off brilliant Donald Pleasance performances, but you got things like The Flesh and the Fiends, The Great Escape, and he'd had some experience of that in the Second World War. He'd been a conscientious objector at first until the Luftwaffe started bombing London, and then he joined up in the RAF, and he was aboard a Lancaster bomber one night which got shot down over Argenville in France, and he spent some time in a prisoner of war camp putting on plays for fellow prisoners to keep spirits up. So The Great Escape must have been quite a personal project for him, I guess. But he's brilliant in that. He's the best Blofeld in You Only Live Twice. His Deathline, fantastic film, Deathline, about the cannibals in the London Underground, marvelous film. From Beyond the Grave, Halloween, Escape from New York. We could go on all night. I mean, the man was in so many great films.
And of course, Waking Fright.
Waking Fright, yeah,
it's
when
terrifying
he's
Australian alcoholic movie.
That's right. Yes, a fantastic film and a brilliant. He was on TV. He was in 1984 with Peter Cushing. I mean, the man was in everything, And
yes.
Again, a little bit like we were saying earlier on about other actors, that he just brought something to it. That face, that incredible face, that incredible voice. That he'd just bring something, some indefinable class to a role. No matter how tacky the film became, he was marvelous in it. He gave it his all. He's just absolutely brilliant. Let's do a podcast on Donald Pleasance one day. To hell with the Westerns, we'll just do Donald Pleasance.
We could do a Donald Pleasance one day, definitely. Right, okay, so we'll move swiftly on to our next film. It's this one is a bit more of a cameo, really. So our British actor in this Western is Christopher Lee. The Western itself is Hannie Caulder, and it was directed by Burt Kennedy in 1971.
These are the Clemens brothers. Crude, brutal, savage.
Look what we got for supper.
This is Hannie Caulder, a woman alone in a man's world, hell-bent on revenge.
Me and my horses need water.
Hannie Caulder, cool, calculating.
God, that guy's built.
Thomas Luther Price, bounty hunter. A strange and lethal partnership that deals in death.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Anytime. Anytime at all.
You weren't the sheriff. I'd call one.
Your bottom's wet.
So's your chin.
Deb, who's down there? Custer?
Let me get him.
The reason I take such pains with the outside of a gun is because I've always thought death very unattractive.
Hannie Caulder, a big bonanza of a Western. With an internationally famous all-star cast. Raquel Welch is Hannie Caulder. Bounty hunter Robert Culp. Academy Award winner Ernest Borgnine. Jack Elam. Strother Martin. Christopher Lee. Diana Dors.
Looks like your sign fell down.
Riding towards a rendezvous with death, the beautiful Avenger and her ruthless adversaries. An explosive vendetta that can only be settled by the gun.
Get up.
The time had come. Hannie Caulder was ready for the kill.
Strap it on.
Can I put my pants on?
You're not gonna need them for long.
Hannie Caulder was produced by Tygon Pictures, most famous for their horror film output, but we can have a chat about that in a second. It was shot in Almeria and tells the story of Hannie Caulder, played by Raquel Welch, who at the beginning of the film is raped by 3 buffoonish bank robbers, played by Jack Elam, Ernest Borgnine, and Strother Martin. And they burn a house down, they kill her husband, and she goes out to seek revenge, meeting up with a bounty killer called Thomas Luther Price, played by the incredibly cool Robert Culp in this film. And she learns how to shoot. She goes down Mexico way, and down there they meet the gunsmith, Bailey, played by Christopher Lee, who's a rebel gunsmith settled south of the border. And she learns how to shoot, and eventually we get some good bloody violence to round the film off. So, what do you think of Hannie Caulder?
A real surprise, this one. Again, it was one of those that I'd read lots of things about it, and most of it wasn't good. Most of it was quite negative. I thought Raquel Welch was fantastic in this. She's really good. She's really good. She gives a proper performance. And that always surprises me, because whenever I've seen her in things, she is giving a proper performance, but we only ever remember this sort of pin-up sex symbol because of 1 Million Years BC, which we mentioned earlier. But she was actually a very good actress, still is. So, and very, very good in it. It's a sort of rape revenge movie, I suppose, isn't it? It's part of that sort of cycle of films, but it's a little bit classier than that. And then, you know, you've got this interesting story of her learning to take her revenge in a man's world by becoming like a man, learning to be a gunfighter, you know, adopting a male role. And then suddenly Christopher Lee turns up, and it's even better still. So, yeah, absolutely wonderful film. I don't know why people don't like this film. It's a lot of fun.
I find it very I find that very interesting, because a lot of people think it's a bit of a naff Western, but actually it's a good 90-minute revenge film. It looks great. The performances are great. I think Robert Culp is excellent in this film.
Brilliant in it, isn't he? Yeah.
You expect from a production company like Tygon that it may be a bit more low budget, but it's not. It's a good, well-produced film.
To be fair to Tygon, they had low budgets, but I mean, you know, on those low budgets, they made films like Witchfinder General, which was you know, a classic of its kind. So they were clearly able to. I mean, okay, they did make things like The Body Stealers and The Haunted House of Horror and the horrific Norman Wisdom film, What's Good for the Goose, which is pretty terrible by any standards. But when they were able, they did Blood on Satan's Claw, another film which had no money, but they were able to marshal all the right elements for it. And Hannie Caulder kind of feels in that sort of vein, really. It's this low-budget film that they just happen to get all the right people for it at the right time. And something good came out of it.
So tell me a little bit more about Christopher Lee, who was born in Belgravia, London.
He was indeed, yeah. Again, like Sean Connery, do we really need to introduce Christopher Lee? If you don't know who Christopher Lee is, you don't really. You haven't been watching this podcast, basically, if you don't know who Christopher Lee is, because you just wouldn't be interested in films if you didn't know. He was Dracula, he was Count Dooku, he was Saruman. I mean, you know, every generation has their own Christopher Lee character that they absolutely love and adore. And he was just one of the best actors this country ever produced. Not often thought of in that sense, because he made so many genre films, so people tended to look down their nose at him a little bit. But he was an absolutely stunning actor. You can watch his performances, and they're a masterclass in screen acting. They really are absolutely outstanding. And I was really lucky. I met him several times, and he had this very fearsome reputation, you know, for not tolerating fools and being something of a fool. I was quite concerned when I first met him, but he really could not have been more charming. The first time I met him, he was doing a signing at the old cinema store in London.
Yeah,
and I was introduced to him, and I got a really heavy cold. And somebody said, "Don't get too close to Kev. He's got a cold." And he sort of fixed the other people with this steely glare and said, "So why is the young man working today?" And he was really concerned about me all the way through. He kept offering me water. I was like, okay, you know, all the rest of it. And at the end of that session, I was talking to him about how I got a letter from Peter Cushing. I'd written to Peter Cushing asking, could I come and do an interview with him? And I got this lovely letter back from Peter Cushing. And I was sending my reply to that when it came on the news that he died. So I got one of the last letters that Peter Cushing ever wrote. And I was telling him about this, and he was really interested in it. And he sort of had this faraway look in his eye, you know, when I was talking about Peter Cushing. He clearly still missed him a great deal, and they were such good friends. And I met him on several occasions. And he was always, you know, came through the shop. And he would have, morning, gentlemen, how are we all? You know, and asking if we're going to go and see the new Lord of the Rings or whatever. Did you see the last one? Or that sort of thing. So, yeah, really, really lovely guy. All those horror stories that you hear about him being a bit snooty and a bit, you know, above himself. Not a bit of it. Not a bit of it. If you were an idiot around him, if you got on the wrong side of him, then you knew all about that. But if you were respectful and polite, he was an absolute gentleman. Really lovely guy.
Fantastic. And he's very good in this.
He's very good. I mean, look, he's very good in everything. Again, he's one of those guys that made some appalling rubbish. You know, the return of Captain Invincible. Yes, I'm looking at you. But he made some awful rubbish. But he was always, again, the best thing about it. You know, as soon as he went off screen, the films just went, ugh. And then he came back on. And he, oh, look, it's Christopher Lee. This is excellent now. This is really, oh, he's gone again. You know, so he's one of those actors. He just enlivened everything he was in. Again, let's do a Christopher Lee podcast one day. I mean, they're just, you know, these actors, they're wonderful. We could talk about them all day.
Oh, they are, yes. And of course, Hannie Caulder is wonderful, and he's a big part of that.
Yes, yes. You know? He did such a good performance. Considering he's in it so little. It's more of a cameo than an actual starring role, but he makes such an impact in it.
We've also forgotten one other British thespian who's in Hannie Caulder. One of our femme fatales from the 1950s, Diana Dawes, is in Hannie Caulder.
Of course she is.
She plays the madam in the saloon.
That's right, yeah. This was in the, sort of the phase where she'd gone past the whole sort of sex pot thing. She was doing much more the sort of character roles at this stage. And yeah, I mean, so good in it, you kind of forget it's her, which I did from her, because she just becomes the character. And which is what a good character actor should do, you know. But again, a surprise, you know, although Hannie Caulder was a British film, it was a surprise to see her turn up in the same way that it was a surprise to see Eric Sykes turning up in Shalako. They're the last people in the world you expect to find in the Old West.
Exactly, yes. Okay, so this is our last film for today. It's been really good going through these British actors in Westerns. Fantastic. Now this one, I don't know what we can say about this. This is a nasty, mean-spirited Western. It's a British actor here is the hell-raising Oliver Reed, and the film's called The Hunting Party. It was directed by Don Medford in 1971.
When you go hunting with Brant Ruger, you go first class all the way. Private railroad cars, the finest food and wines, beautiful women, the best hunting equipment.
Gun has that raised. $700 a piece. It's a present for you boys. It's one for each of you. I thought it would add a little something to the hunting.
And the most dangerous game of all, man.
Brad! Mr. Ruger, your wife's been kidnapped.
I am Brant Ruger's wife.
It don't matter whose wife you are. Go, man, Matt? No. This'll do it. 700-800 yards.
You mean to say that we go up against them?
Up close, no. But from a distance.
No gun shoots that far.
When your prey is man, it's always open season. There's no limit and no rules.
Ryan, stop it! Why? They're not game we bagged. Human beings. $100 says it. That he can't put. Just pick off a few more now. Let us stay out of sight. Let her go. You get rid of her, I will. Let her go! It doesn't make sense anymore.
Right?
Malcolm's gonna ride back and find that man and tell him he can have the woman.
As I said, what can we say about the hunting party?
It's
thoroughly
brutal,
mean-spirited, impossible to find a noble character amongst a really bad bunch of men. It starts with an uncomfortable to watch bedroom scene between the husband and the wife, Brandt Ruger, played by Gene Hackman, and Melissa Ruger, again Candice Bergen, which is intercut with the cow being cold, and it sort of trips along from there.
Yes. Yes.
Now, Brandt commands a train to take his filthy rich friends hunting with extremely high-powered rifles, and at the same time, Melissa's kidnapped by a gang led by Bert Caulder, played by Oliver Reed, and they head into the desert. Now, Caulder's motivation seems that he wants her to teach him to read. Ruger, finding this out, decides that he's going to use the high-powered rifles not to shoot bison or whatever they intended to shoot at the beginning, but to gun Caulder's gang down one by one. It's the killings in this film are very voyeuristic because we're looking down gun sights.
That's right. Yeah,
there are huge blood squibs. It's made in the wake of course, Wild Bunch. Is a far more noble film, actually.
Oh yes, yeah.
Compared to this, it's got some good character actors. You've got L.Q. Jones in there, and you've got some good stars. You've got Hackman, who's brilliant in everything. Candice Bergen, who's very good.
Yeah.
And then Oliver Reed is fantastic. But God damn, it's mean.
It is a nasty, grim film, isn't it? And it's kind of one of those films that has very few redeeming features, and yet, don't judge me, I kind of liked it.
Well,
it's a difficult one to really sort of quantify, because it is, by any standards, it's a repellent film that no one should like. There's nobody in it that you admire, but there's something about it that I was absolutely glued to it the whole time it was on. And it's really difficult to put my finger on why, because there's nobody in it I wanted to be in the same room with. Wouldn't want to be on the same continent as most of them, let alone in the same room. They were horrible people doing horrible things to each other, and yet somehow I found it all gripping.
And it's also the message that it conveys is kind of this Stockholm syndrome message between Caulder and Mrs. Ruger, Candice Bergen character. I mean, it becomes easier to understand given the first scene where obviously she's fighting her husband off.
Yeah.
And Caulder, Oliver Reed, is incredibly charismatic and very masculine. But even that is still the message within that.
Yes.
Still really, really hard to stomach. Of course, it fits the context of 1971 cinema. It fits.
Of course, yeah.
I mean, what else was released in?
Got Last House on the Left around that time, hadn't we? Which you got that same sort of. There's very few people in here that are likable, and you kind of have a begrudging fascination with these films where they're not. I wouldn't go and watch The Hunting Party again. I'm not going to finish this podcast and think, oh, I've talked about The Hunting Party, I'll go and watch that again. I may never watch it again, to be honest. But it's like Last House on the Left. It's endlessly fascinating for reasons that are kind of difficult to pin down.
Yeah, I think, I mean, what I got from it was like a I mean, as the film progresses, obviously you get fewer and fewer members of the cast.
That's right.
Still standing. And Ruger and Melissa Ruger and Caulder head further and further into the desert. It gets hotter and nastier and bloodier, and it's almost like a journey into hell. It's like
that's right. It is
going through this circles of hell type idea. But it's an unhinged film. The ending is
completely
unhinged.
Yeah.
But anyway, I mean, Oliver Reed is in it. Born on 13th of February 1938 in Wimbledon, London. He died on the 2nd of May 1999 in Malta. Do you have a little story about Oliver's last day?
He went out pretty much the way you'd imagine he'd want to go out. He'd been filming Gladiator for Ridley Scott, and they were in Malta. They were in a bar. He was in a bar, and the story goes that he'd been quite well behaved. He'd made promises to Ridley Scott not to drink on set, and David Hemmings had given Scott his assurance that, you know, I'll keep an eye on him, don't worry. But somehow this day he slipped the net, and he made it to a bar on his own in Malta, where a whole bunch of sailors from the Royal Navy turned up. And what ensued, from what we can gather, is there was an arm wrestling contest between I think 5 of these sailors and Ollie Reed, and he beat every one of them. And then for an encore decided to drink them under the table, as was his way. And sadly, it was all too much for him, and he suffered a massive heart attack. So he died. He died in a bar drinking, and I kind of, you know, it's almost a comical image in a way. If it wasn't so tragic, it'd be comical. But you kind of think, well, actually, he's probably out there wherever we go after all of this, out there having a good laugh at us, thinking, oh yeah, well, half of us are tutting at him for wasting his life, the other half are, you know, mourning him and missing him, and he's thinking, well, I went out the way I wanted to, you know, I had a great time.
That's what he did. I mean, you know, we always saw every television interview with him, he was smashed. And I
think that was to his detriment in a way, because I think we now, or a lot of people, I think, just remember him as being this pisshead that turned up on late night chat shows and offended everybody. And certainly there was a lot of that. And there have been suggestions that a lot of it was exaggerated on his part.
Yes,
that this was an image that had been that had built up around him, and just his bizarre sense of humor, he thought, I'd play into this. So he quite often, apparently, or so it's been suggested, wasn't as drunk as he appeared to be. He was just putting on another performance. I don't know. No one will ever know the answer to that one. But I think it's overshadowed his career a little bit, because I think a lot of people, if you say Oliver Reed, they just think, you know, drunken bum on television. They don't remember all the great performances he gave.
Yeah, I mean, he was in a lot of great films, wasn't he? He was.
Yeah. Well, he got his start with Hammer films. He made a whole rake of Hammer films. I think like Sword of Sherwood Forest, Curse of the Werewolf, of course, was the famous one that he did, which was the sort of the one that made him. He was in The Damned, Paranoiac, some really great films. And then he had this association with Michael Winner for a while, where he was in The System in 1964. There was The Jokers in 1966, and I'll never forget what's his name, Hannibal Brooks, and then that remake of The Big Sleep that Winner did in 1968. And of course, probably most famously with Ken Russell. Got Women in Love,
of
The
course,
Devils,
he's in The Devils.
Tommy. Really great performances, Tommy. Yeah, absolutely great. And he later said, Hammer Films had given me my start, and Michael Winner my bread. Then Ken Russell came on the scene and gave me my art.
I was going to say,
So he
handled
never sort of,
all of those things.
Absolutely, and he was great in all of them. He never he never got snooty enough to say, oh no, I only did those for the money. He was always very proud of the work that he did. You know, he was but like I say, I just think that the hell raising didn't do him any good in the end. I think, you know, people forget that he could do comedy like Hannibal Brooks. They forget he could do horror like Curse of the Werewolf. You know, he could do all sorts of great things. And we forget that. We just think, oh yeah, old Ollie, you know, rolling about on a seat on a late night chat show. But don't think like that. Go and watch some of his films. He was brilliant. Go and watch Gladiator. He's fantastic in Gladiator. Really good in Gladiator. So
go and watch The Devils if you can. 1971.
1971 was one hell of a year for that kind of film. Yes, really disturbing. Your Clockwork Orange as well, of course. And
yeah.
Yes.
Wow. Well, that is it. Some fantastic films there.
Some great films, some brilliant actors. We've gone through some really great actors.
Yeah.
Some of my absolute favourite of all time in there.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about it. And we came up with some more really mouth-watering titles. So we'll probably
we might be able to do a part 2.
We'll probably will do From Blighty to the Badlands Part 2, because there are some really choice films we can look at.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. This has been great fun. This has been really good. And if nothing else, Tepepa, that was the one that I'd never seen before. And that was the one I came away from all of this thinking, yeah,
Fantastic.
This is something a bit special. Yeah. Good stuff.
Excellent. All right. So that's it from myself, Clark Hodgkiss, and from Kevin Lyons.
Thank you very much for having me here. It's been great fun again, as always.
Superb. Yeah, no, thank you very much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the podcast, and we'll see you again with another interesting look at Westerns, hopefully from a left field or some sort of strange angle that we can come up with. And we'll try and keep it up, even though we've both been suffering from various ailments.
It's our age, mate. We're old and knackered and falling apart. That's what it is.
We are. I think we're not in it for the groupies, are we, Kevin?
No, this is true. This is true. I cannot deny this.
Right, before Kevin sneezes, goodbye.
Goodbye.